All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will not be talking about controversial subjects like William Chung. Lots of gems, lots of cliffhangers, and lots of, yeah, he's totally going to talk about William Chung. Let's get to it.
And every day, I practice martial arts. Watch out!
Yo, Dre, how you doing, man?
Hey, Sifu, how are you?
Good. I feel like, do you remember the 1989 Michael Keaton Batman? So he brings Vicky Vale, played by Kim Basinger, over to his place, and he has that super, super long dining room table. And where they're like basically, hey, how's it? Do you want to pass the salt? Right.
Yeah.
So
we've
been recording
right?
episodes here at the KFG crib for a couple weeks, and the table, my dining room table, which is also our podcast table, can extend. We decided to extend it today, and now I feel like this is the furthest we've ever been while recording a podcast.
Okay, so I have a quick question while we're on that. Right, is it Basinger or Basinger? Because I always called it. I also thought it was Kim Basinger back in the 80s and 90s, and then I started hearing people pronounce it as Basinger, and I'm like, so which one is it? Because I always thought it was Kim Basinger.
Is something I'm not even sure about.
I believe it's Kim Basinger.
I would say so.
Because the majority of all the tabloids and news people and
the way they say it.
They said it. Kim Basinger.
I'm pretty sure we'll have someone in the comments going, well, actually, it's this. So the great thing about YouTube is you always have someone who will Google something while we're talking about it and then correct us on the record.
And
in live
please
time.
do, in real time.
Yes.
In real time when we have no time to even get.
And I want to see how they write it.
Oh, yeah.
It's passing grr or jur, right? Okay, yeah, it's going to be great.
Of course.
Yes. Yeah. Speaking of Keaton Batman, like I don't watch the Oscars or any of that stuff.
The Oscars
but I do know, but I do occasionally see some clips, and Michael Keaton was there when Arnold and Danny DeVito came on there, who played former villains defeated by Batman, although Arnold Schwarzenegger was actually in the
what I was
Clooney
thinking.
one, right?
Right.
And he did the whole Keaton did the whole come to Batman kind of thing. But what a lot of people or I was pointed out on social media is that he was wearing the ascot like the Adam West Batman or the Adam West Bruce Wayne.
Interesting.
Yeah. So he was kind of like, it was a bit of an homage to Adam West, so which I thought was pretty cool. Yeah, so here we are with another Patreon Ask Me Anything episode.
I just feel like you're so far away.
Oh, yeah.
Anybody. What?
Yeah, he's going for Rod Stewart, man. That's ballsy. That's bold.
You are going in. I'm actually
He's so far away from me right now.
He's so
strange.
Far
you could
away.
have gone the Dire Straits route and be like, so far away from me.
I could have.
I just can't see.
Wow.
I could have went that route, but I never.
By the way,
never heard
people
that song
may not
in my
know
life.
this, but Mikey Dean's got a set of pipes on him.
He does.
At this point, I've been to karaoke at least twice with him. And he not only has a decent set of pipes, but he is a showman.
I've been to this place, MK Lounge in K-Town.
Yes.
And we were doing karaoke for like someone's birthday party. And the guy comes in, he's like, hey, you guys want to order anything? And then he looks at me like, you with Mikey, aren't you? Is he here? Is he on his way? I'm like, Mikey Dean? Yeah, is he on his way? I was like blown away by that.
Oh, people know him there. He's like the regular. Yeah.
I was like,
That's awesome.
yeah, I guess he's on his way. And then all of a sudden the whole check was free.
Wow.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, we got to do karaoke more often.
Yes, we really
did
do.
karaoke in Hong Kong, and we did karaoke here for Mikey's birthday. But we got to do it.
Was it MK Lounge?
No, it was a place called Radio Star, which, by the way, if anyone's in New York, is awesome. It's a really, really great karaoke place, has private rooms, and also, this is not a paid promotion, by the way. I just really like the place.
Yeah.
Their public bar has like a little stage, and like the sound system is loud enough that you can really belt it out, and they've got the mics mixed correctly, so. Some places you go to, like when they just bury the limiters and like the mic just completely just kills the music, and you're like, this place is like it's cool, it's with it.
We should do like a KFG karaoke party for like I suppose more the local fans of KFG, like who's going to come to New York.
Oh, yeah.
A lot
that'd
of
be
our
awesome.
listeners tend to be from elsewhere. But
Okay.
yeah, we should do some kind of like KFG karaoke
Yeah,
night.
We could
That
do
would-
it at the
go.
school. I got speakers, and you get all the karaoke stuff on YouTube now. It's super easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can belt
There's an
out
idea.
the Wong Fei Hung song.
Yes, this is that's the highlight. You have to do the Wong Fei Hung song.
Yes.
Like literally, that's the finishing move. You know what I mean? If
I
you,
don't know if I was
I
called
don't
the
know if
Wong
you've
Fei
seen it.
Hong song.
I don't know if you've seen it, but I've
No.
seen it twice.
Yeah.
and it's fantastic.
I've been trained by the best, by the way. I did the George Lamb version of, Man Must Be Strong, Lam Yi Dong Ji Kang, right? From the 91 or 92 Once Upon a Time in China, the Oh Hey Oh Xiu Man Chong Long, right? And Yi Hu Bi Ting Hong Yak Guang. Come on, sing it with me. You know the words.
I believe I know the song, but
But I did that song a number of times with Sifu William Cheung at karaoke in Flushing. And then, but that was like his one thing, right? He would do that song and they'd be like, okay, now in Mandarin, right? And then it would be like the Mandarin version of that song, right?
oh no.
And then he told me like the whole history of it or whatever. So I've been trained
In
not just
both.
in Wing Chun, but also in karaoke skills by the great Grandmaster Yip Man.
You heard it here first, kids.
Yes.
that is
So,
spectacular.
Yeah, but before we get started, just want to remind everyone that the best way to support the Kung Fu Genius is on Patreon. Patreon.com/The Kung Fu Genius. For as little as $5, you get access to episodes early. Higher levels of support now, we have even more good stuff on Patreon. Not only do I have my like subscriber reels and like higher levels of support, we even have like the English translations of Yip Man interviews and stuff like that. But because we've done a bunch of episodes on history, a lot of people are asking me to do more of this stuff because I've been becoming a bit of an extremely armchair warrior historian here.
Oh yes.
Not so much to find out what the actual history of Wing Chun is, because there really is not a lot in terms of that. Don't get me wrong. There are people out there who will make very positive claims about, it is Yikam, it is this, it is that, whatever. But the fact that people make a bold claim or a claim that seems to be full of confidence doesn't make it true, because you need facts to substantiate stuff. Just throwing out a bunch of Chinese names and dates and then saying blah, blah, blah doesn't mean it's actually
But Sifu.
history. Yes.
Sifu, they were all there.
They
That's
were all
the
there,
thing.
of course, right?
That's the
Especially
thing.
especially when the person telling you all this history can't even speak Chinese.
Oh no.
So rather than trying to say definitively what the history of Wing Chun is, because I don't really think anyone can, I'm starting with the debunking of myths, but not in a simple way where everyone's like, oh yeah, well, the story's probably not true. But let's discuss how the story is not
in
true.
a simple way.
Let's
Yeah.
discuss like, why do these kind of fairy tales like the Five Elders and the Burning of Shell, like where does this stuff come from?
Yeah.
How does this stuff mutate over time? How do we know that this thing can be fiction, right? So for my like second tier, not the $5 tier, for my second tier on Patreon, I'm going to try about once a month to do like a 45-minute
Debunk.
well, let's say a slightly deeper dive into some of these things, right?
Okay.
And I think after I talk about the Shaolin myths, because I just did one video where I read, Grandmaster Yip Man in 1965 wrote the so-called history of Wing Chun, which is the well-worn fairy tale we all know with Yim Wing Chun and her husband and the nun and the
Now
five elders and
this
stuff.
writing, where would this be?
So
Publicated.
there's a copy of it in many books on Wing Chun.
Okay.
So Leung Ting has it in his original Wing Chun Kun book.
Got it.
He reprinted it again in Roots of Wing Chun with an English translation. So what I did is I actually read Leung Ting's English translation of it. I cleaned it up a little bit, and it's 8 paragraphs, the original writing by Yip Man.
Oh wow.
And so after each paragraph, I pause and then I talk about, okay, here's some of the interesting things in that paragraph, right? And here's some ways that we can tell that it's a mytho-fiction. Here are some ways we could tell that it's most likely a narrative story or a fairy tale rather than an actual history. And so I do that, and it's about a 50-minute long video, which is a critical, not like I'm criticizing Yip Man, but it's a critical discussion of Yip Man's written history, which is more or less the standard of which everyone kind of copies a little bit, right? So I talk about that. I'm going to do another one where I'm going to talk about the Hong Moon version of the burning of the Shaolin Temple. Then I'm going to talk about some other styles of Kung Fu, which also use a very similar origin story, including also having characters like Wing Chun, like 5-pattern Hong Kun has a Fong Wing Chun. And in it as well. So we're not even the only one that says like we have a female attached to it, right? So I did this deep dive. Right now it's open for all the Patreon supporters, but moving forward, it'll be for the second tier.
Shout out to all the Patreons.
And so if you want to support the KFG, the best way is on Patreon, patreon.com/the Kung Fu Genius.
The greatest
and we have another way where our listeners can support us, and that's right here on YouTube. For those of you who watch our shows on YouTube, we now have memberships here. So we have 3 tiers as of this recording. All right. Like the lowest tier, I think it's like $2.99 a month or something like that.
Not bad.
You'll get a basic response to a comment, because right now it's getting to the point where I can't really respond to the comments anymore. So if you want to respond to the comments, hey, throw $3 at us a month.
Are they that hideous, or is it just too many?
It's just too many.
Okay.
And then sometimes people decide, like people are starting to fight with each other on there, like especially about. It's funny,
the bickering,
the topics like Bruce Lee and MMA and all these things that we would think are like the controversial hot button topics don't hold anything to the history ones that we do. Because someone comes in and says, no, the history of Wing Chun is insert the standard story that everyone's heard. And they're like, that's it. It's like restating the story is not evidence. And also, like, it's like people think like, oh no, like Yip Man learned from Leung Bick and blah, blah, blah. It's like, bro, that's the story we all started with. We're going beyond that. You're like, you're bringing us back to kindergarten as if we haven't heard that story already. Calm down. So like, I don't have a lot of time to respond to that, because it's like if someone is going to present the original fairy tale, not with evidence, just say the fairy tale again as if it's fact. I can't start with you. You're clearly not watching the videos. Or you have the other people saying, no, it's like these famous noisemakers like Sergio said this or that or whatever. Okay, great. Where's the actual evidence? Besides that he heard it from a Chinese guy that he likes. All right. Okay. Like this is not how history is proven. You could say, well, I like this version of it, or there may be some things to indicate this could be factual, but the idea is like, no, this is it. Okay. Where you can't even make those kind of positive claims about other aspects of history, like Alexander the Great or biblical history or whatever. Right. But no, he's got it down with Chinese people that, supposedly existed 200-300 years ago or whatever. Right. And so the problem is you always need to curb your claims based on the evidence. All right. You have to measure them based on the evidence. Right. It's about probabilities. It's not about certainty. Right. So now YouTube, our people who follow us on YouTube, if they don't want to go to Patreon, they can become members. Like I said, the lowest tier is I'll answer your comments. The second tier is I think it's $4.99 a month or something like that. You can type in suggestions and questions. So it's not just like Patreons who can get their questions answered. If you're at the $5 tier on YouTube, provided the question is relevant, it's not a guarantee your question's going to get on an episode, but that's the way to do it.
How do you make a grilled cheese?
Exactly. Yeah. And then the third tier, I think it's like $9.99. It's basically $10, and they can get this subscriber video, this like history video that I do, and I'm going to do about one of those a month. And of course, the $10 tier gets all the stuff that the lower tiers get. So you can also suggest episode stuff where you can also get your comments answered. So yeah, Patreon for those of you who want to support us that way, and now YouTube for those of you who want to support us there. And we also have a swag shop where you can get cool things like KFG mugs and KFG sweatshirts and all sorts of cool
Link
stuff
below.
So anyway, enough of that nonsense. So we got some Patreon questions, Dre. What you got for me?
We have them here. I'm going to start with Jonathan Owens.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay. Get this going. In the book I'm reading, there are 2 topics I'd love to hear cleared up. I'm not going to mention the book he's reading. I think you know the title. 2 topics. 1, Yip Man teaching the Chanwai Shan style to all his students that, with exception to his only live-in disciple to whom he taught the Leung Bic version. What are your thoughts on this? 2. Was Bruce Lee kicked out of the school? This book credits Wang Shenlong and Choi Shun-tin with his training. This particular story continues with Bruce being kicked out of school and his training taken over with by another. Both questions stem from modern Wing Chun, Fight Like a Woman, page 32.
Hey everyone, just want to let you know Wing Chun Illustrated is now offering a paperback edition through Amazon, reaching a larger global market. And no, they're not ditching the glossy magazine edition through MagCloud. You can now simply choose the version of this magazine you prefer and the one with the cheapest shipping wherever you live. Order your copy of Wing Chun Illustrated today across 12 Amazon marketplaces with free shipping for Prime members. Go and check that out.
So we got this on Patreon. Later in the comments in Patreon, I asked him what book he was reading, and it's not in that snapshot I sent you, but I think it's a book called Modern Wing Chun. It's a book by Sifu Eric Oram.
Okay.
Eric Oram is a student of Sifu William Cheung, and Eric Oram is also famously the Sifu of Robert Downey Jr.
Okay.
And I've met Eric Oram on 2 occasions. I actually met him. Yeah, I met him once here in New York City while they were doing the first Sherlock Holmes film. And then I also met him in L.A. Again
like Jan,
Lomong's birthday party. So, yeah, I met him a couple times. Cool. And I suppose this topic, it's interesting because Jonathan, our Patreon who wrote this, he's reading this book, sends these very innocent questions.
Give me.
But the issue is that this is a kind of a very loaded political thing because Eric Oram, obviously being the student of William Chung, is going to, I haven't read the book, but based on the question and based on what I know of William Chung's origin lore and what his own students propagate, the history in this book is going to be heavily influenced by a narrative that William Chung has been trying to sell, I think, since the late 70s at least, but perhaps earlier. But really, it didn't make it into the U.S. martial art magazines until, I'm going to say, the late 70s. And really in the 80s, it started to pop. Okay. So, of course, because I am from the Leung Ting lineage, and the Leung Ting lineage and the William Chung lineage traditionally had some beef in the 80s, kind of, all right? But I just, before maybe I say anything, all right? And I've said this before on the podcast, but again, the issue is sometimes people have not heard those other episodes and they might hear this episode first. And if they come from the William Chung line, maybe they may assume that what I'm saying is kind of salty or something like that because they haven't seen the 30 other times I've referenced this issue on the podcast. So I have to give a bit of a throat clearing before.
What is this throat clearing, Sifu?
I have to give a bit of a throat clearing before I discuss anything about William Chung, given the history of Leung Ting and William Chung. All right. And everyone has their own opinion. Most of their own opinions are either whether they're on Team Chung or Team Leung, or if they're not on either one of those teams, it's whatever narrative their Sifu gave them. But whether you're on Team William Chung on this story or Team Leung Ting on this story, or everyone else's narrative, all 3 of them are kind of wrong anyway, because you have different sides of the story and then you have the truth somewhere there. And I'm not claiming to say or know what the truth is, but one must be mindful of the lens and filters you have on when you're saying the story and listening to stories, especially counter narratives, right? So my throat clearing is this, all right? In the 1980s, Sifu William Cheung had some very specific claims about the historicity of his version of Wing Chun. And these claims were at odds with what every single other student of Yip Man was claiming, all right? And it became quite contentious. Sifu William Chung would claim things in magazines. And then at some point, the Wing Chun Athletic Association, the VTAA, which at that time in the 80s was they would have like yearly elections. They still do, but nowadays, because so few of Grandmaster Yip Man, because so few of Grandmaster Yip Man students are still alive, the people who are on the board are students, grad students, maybe even not like really hardcore Wing Chun people or whatever. But in the 1980s, the board of directors, they were still almost exclusively students of Yip Man because they were still alive. So you had Wang Zhenleong, Choi Sheng-tin, the Yip brothers. You had a bunch of Leung Ting, bunch of people, right? So they would write these letters, and it would be signed basically by the students of Yip Man, right? So the Wing Chun Athletic Association had to answer some of William Cheung's claims. And so that kind of started a bit of a rift between William Chung and basically everyone else. And so in the early to mid 80s, I think it's definitely in the mid 80s, William Chung said in Combat Magazine, which was a British magazine, that the style of Wing Chun that he taught was superior to all the other Wing Chun styles because it was like the authentic style was the Leung Bik style, so on and so forth. And he would be willing to prove that anytime, any place. As a matter of fact, the title of the article was called The Challenge. And not a lot of people stateside know this because it was in a British martial art magazine, right? And so basically, William Chung said, hey, the style that I teach is superior to the other Wing Chun styles. And F around and find out is basically what he's saying, right? Come by and I'll show you, all right? And then in September of 1986, William Chung did a seminar in Cologne, Germany. And by 1986, the EWTO, the European Wing Chun Organization, the Leung Ting's organization under Sifu Cheung, was already about 10 years old and very well established. They had a lot of schools. And William Chung and Leung Ting already by that time had a little bit of a rift, very minor. There's actually a photo of Leung Ting and William Chung and a bunch of other students of Yip Man having dim sum in the late 70s. So at some point they were at least cordial with each other. But then there were some things kind of being said back and forth, and Leung Ting gave a demonstration in New York, and while he was demonstrating something, some guy tried to hit him or do something while he's in the middle of a demonstration. And then, according to my friend Kenny Chin, who was there, Leung Ting, after he got hit, kind of defended himself and shucked the guy off the stage. And when the guy walked off, he saw that the guy was wearing a William Chung shirt. And then knowing Sifu Leung Ting the way I know it, that guy who came to kind of, maybe clown Leung Ting during a demonstration, which, by the way, any instructor can be clowned during a demonstration. If you don't think your instructor can be clowned during a demonstration, it just hasn't happened yet, right?
Oh, no.
And of course, knowing Sifu Leung Ting the way I know him, he would never assume that student wearing a William Chung shirt came of his own volition. Yeah. He would automatically assume William Chung was behind this, all right? Which may or may not be the case. But knowing Sifu Leung Ting the way I know him, one would assume that he would think William Chung is behind. It's not just that guy who was wearing a William Chung shirt came up and tried to
shirt that he found,
whatever, right?
He bought it.
So that, I believe, that incident, which happened in New York, was the genesis of William Chung's being caught in Leung Ting's crosshairs. All right.
Oh, wow.
And then when William Chung gave this seminar in Cologne, Germany in September 86, the EWTO knew that William Chung was coming because the seminar was advertised or whatever. And they had, according to one of my instructors at the castle, Sifu Cheung, in preparation, like Leung Ting wanted someone to come in, with William Chung saying all these things. He's saying he's the best fighter. He's saying he can show anyone, anytime, any place. So, okay, why don't we
make that the place?
Why don't we call him on it, right? Because the other students of the other people in the Yip Man lineage, all right, doesn't matter who they were, most of them were still afraid of William Chung, because William Chung had a reputation from the late 50s of being a really good fighter, which he was. He was also bigger than most of the other Chinese guys, more like 5'9", 5'10", which made him bigger than even people like Bruce Lee, right? And so I think it was a matter of, back in the days when he was training Wing Chun with everyone, he was like kind of he was the class bully. He was just like, I don't know if you remember, I used to teach a student named Eugene, all right? And if you remember Eugene, it was like, Eugene's like the big, strong dude who, can give everyone fits, even if he's not as technical as some of the other guys. It's just normal. You have a Eugene You have a William
in
Chung in
every
every school, right? Okay.
Without fail.
And so I think that a lot of the old students of Yip Man still remember, well, I mean,
Mikey, have you ever trained with Eugene? You ever met Eugene?
I never trained with Eugene.
You've heard
but
of Eugene?
I know, but like I remember when I started, there was a guy named Dory who.
Oh,
was,
yes.
he
Similar
was
type,
very
similar
similar
type.
type. One of the
Dory.
only. Yeah, he was the only time I've seen someone. Well, actually, the same night, 2 people got failed.
Yeah.
On their black shirt test,
Yeah.
but him very specifically, like the other guy, like a guy he hadn't trained for a very long time
Yeah.
because he'd been away, so he was just coming back to get his
Yeah.
test. That was, whatever. But Dory was a constant at the school, right? And I've never met someone who was just so competitive about anything.
Everything.
And when he was doing his, I remember when he was doing his gauntlet, which is when he failed because he just wouldn't ever stop every time Egon called
Yeah.
break.
Yeah.
Right. After the 4th or 5th time, like he'd just look at his fist and like, stop hitting people. Like somehow
Looked at his own
Yeah,
fist.
I had to fail him because every time I called break in the fight test,
He would go like an extra
He'd hit the guy 3 more times. Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
And I gave him a warning, like, hey, when I call break, you gotta stop. Okay. And my 3rd time, like, are you done? Out.
Oh, yeah.
It's just like, go.
Yeah.
You
Oh,
can't
goodness.
control yourself. You're a liability to other people. You're going to hurt other people because you can't control your ego. Even though when I call break in the fight exam, like, I'm satisfied. Okay. Like whatever I saw, okay, I'm done. Now the next guy is going to come and attack you, right? Because the gauntlet is a steady stream of people coming in, fresh attackers coming in and trying to attack you, right? And when I call break is break, right? And yeah, it's just like crazy. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, so you always have this kind of like tough guy. I'm not saying William Chung was the guy who was cheap shotting all of his partners, but saying like there's always some kind of tough dude who can give everyone fits. And it's not always because they're the most technical. Sometimes they're just bigger and stronger than us, right? Like you have a saying in Chinese martial arts, the same style, same teacher, you win by size. All right. Okay. Same level or whatever. Right. So anyway, I think most of Yip Man's students were still afraid of William Chung because of his reputation from the old days. Right. So in this time in the 80s, when William Chung was very directly calling out all of the other people in the Wing Chun style and saying that they, these guys weren't fighters, they're just letter writers, and saying some pretty direct trolling things to them. The other guys were still afraid. Like they didn't send any of their students. All right. And so no one else was sending students to go fight the great William Chung, but one of our crazy German sections of the association found, this young Turkish guy, Emin Boztepe, to do it. Right.
Yeah.
By the way, he wasn't the first choice. They chose Emin because of his size was relatively similar to William's, and he was even lighter than William Chung because they were in Germany. You had a lot of fighters in the EWTO who were just much bigger, and it wouldn't have been the move to just send a bigger, stronger dude to come in and smash an aging Sifu at that time. And William Chung was obviously, we're talking about like almost 40-year-old story, right?
Oh, wow.
But he wasn't a spring chicken then either. But he was definitely out of the years which one should partake in challenge fights, right? So they didn't want to just get some like way bigger dude or something like that, right? And there were some other people, namely Thomas Roggenkamp. He was a Sifu
He was one of the
from Hamburg.
candidates.
But they did not pick him specifically because they thought he would have hurt William Chung too much. So the idea is that they wanted to find someone who could kind of control him and rough him up a little bit, but not like permanently destroy him or something like that, right? And so Emin kind of fit the bill because of his abilities. He could kind of control him without hurting him. But there were the other guys at that time where they were like, no, this guy's just going to smash him. So the EWTO was somewhat selective from what I heard. I mean, of course, like these are the stories I've heard from people who were there, but I mean, I'm sure there are other people in the EWTO who are closer to it. Maybe they have a different story. Right? So, these things, talk about not being sure about things that happened in the 1980s. And then now say, okay, but we're totally sure that Wing Chun came in the 1700s from this person. And here we're describing a story that happened in the 80s with people who are still alive. And it's already not entirely sure what the details are because it's all Rashomon.
All you can do
tells
is
their
look at the
version.
footage and kind of like, ooh.
Well, I mean, one of the complaints. So then Emin shows up to this seminar in Cologne. From all accounts, he actually took part in the first half of the seminar. So he was disguised basically as a seminar participant, and there were a few other people from the EWTO who were there. Saliavja was there, and there were some other people. There was the guy who was holding the camera, right? And so about halfway through the seminar, according to lore, Yip Man pulls out the magazine with William Chung's challenge on it, and at that time, Yip Man didn't really speak English very well. So he held the magazine, and I think they just coached him to say a few words.
I heard
English,
he took the
right?
magazine, slapped William Chung on the head.
He holds.
That wasn't true?
He holds the magazine. Bullshit.
Yeah, you're
All
making that shit
Yeah, Dre,
up.
Dre. You have to be sensitive with these stories, okay? Because first of all, I'm very good friends with people in the William Chung lineage, Sifu Phil Redman and Sifu Victor Parlati, and Mike Mundy. All these guys have been like super, super cool to me, right? I am not like, in my throat clearing is that I'm telling you the stories that I heard. As I've said, man, I don't give a shit about any of this stuff.
Right.
This stuff, like this was a big deal for me when I started learning Wing Chun as a teenager. All right. And it was a big deal for me for some time when I was in the Leung Ting organization, because when you're in the Leung Ting organization, you absorb the sins of the father, and you have to not like the William Chung guys because you're in the Leung Ting lineage, right? I've been out of the Leung Ting lineage now or the Leung Ting organization for 13 years. All right. I already didn't really give too much of a crap about the William Chung stuff by the end of my tenure in the IWTA. And I certainly don't give a crap about it now.
detached.
So the idea is it's not to bring up old wounds, but I'm sure it will for people who are, let's say, on the William Chung side. It's not my intention. Just tell the story as I seen it. I don't spend, and this is no disrespect to my friends in the William Chung lineage, I spend no time thinking about William Chung. And I spend no time thinking about his claims. I've gone through all these thought experiments about which we'll talk about in a moment, about what William Chung claimed and so on and so forth. I don't, it's not something that takes up a lot of my brain space. All right. Right now, I'm more into the history of Wing Chun. I'm into the training methodologies. I'm into teaching methods. I'm into improving the way the whole thing is taught. My world is not these bickerings from the 70s and 80s. In 1986, when this happened, all right, I was running around my parents' backyard in ninja costumes, trying to hide from girls riding their bikes. Okay, all right. So let's put things into perspective here. Okay, all right. This is not something that I have a lot of emotional investment in. All right. So it is what it is, because if you're in the Wing Chun world, you're expected to have an opinion on this. If you really ask me, what is my whole opinion on the whole William Chung, Yip Man ball step thing, I would say it wasn't a good idea. It shouldn't have happened. Okay. In hindsight, it didn't completely deconstruct William Chung, and it didn't completely mythologize Yip Man ball step either, right? So I mean, I think the world could have done without this event. I just want to say that. All right. So I'm not saying like, oh yeah, because I'm on the side that won that exchange. I'm not saying like, oh yeah, therefore we won the history. Like I don't give a shit. Okay,
right.
I really don't give a shit. And also, to be fair, I've had some conversations with Sifu William Cheung about the William Chung stuff in the early 2000s, which is already 15 years after this event, and
he was removed from it.
Even he doesn't give a shit anymore. Like he doesn't give a shit anymore. So the idea that even in the Leung Ting organization, like, that all the Leung Ting guys are meeting every Friday and talking about William Chung, all right, is not the case either. So I mean, this is really old shit. But it comes up, and in Jonathan's question, he very innocently says, he read this stuff. It happens to be Eric Orum's book, which has a very strong, I would assume, traditional Wing Chun, William Chung narrative in there. And then so the questions come from that side. So if I don't explain a little bit about the history of the beef, the history of William Chung's claims, then how I would ultimately answer this question might not make sense, right?
Right.
Okay, but again, my super ultra long throat clearing, I don't give a shit. Okay, I'm sorry. I love my friends in the William Chung lineage, and people can teach whatever they want. I don't care what other people teach. I'm not the guy here going like, oh, look at the William Chung footwork, it's like this, or look at the way the Wong Sun Long guys do this, or look at the way the Leung Ting guys do this, or whatever, like some other YouTube. I don't give it. We have discussion. And if people want to learn Wing Chun from me, they can come to my school or learn online. It's not my place here to go and say what's wrong with this or why I think this is better or whatever. There are enough people out there who have that much of infatuation with their own opinions on those kind of things. You can watch those channels instead. So anyway, that was my throat clearing. All right. Bottom line, I don't care. So Emin, shows up to the seminar. He shows up, halfway through, he pulls out the magazines. I'm here for the challenge. I'm going to come 1, 2, 3. Are you ready? That was like all the English they coached him to say, right? And then the narrative, which is often, I think, misconstrued in that fight, is that if you watch, the video starts where they're kind of like clinching, standing up, and Emin sweeps William Chung on the ground. And what people don't realize when you watch it, when you look at the sweep, that's of Emin's volition. They didn't not like Bruce Lee and Wong Jack Man, where Bruce Lee falls on Wong Jack Man, they trip. This is actually, you see that he uses Sifu Emin uses a soul guard, the sweeping leg, and brings William Chung down and lands on him under control. It's not a sacrifice throw. It's not he fell on top of him, right? So, I mean, the idea that there's no skill involved, you take a 1986 William Chung, all right? And you go in there and clinch him and sweep him to the floor. Tell me how well you did. Like, people don't realize that was no small feat to sweep William Chung to the floor. And even Emin, I believe he was quoted somewhere as saying that William Chung was stronger than he thought he was going to be. And then he holds him on the ground, and you see he just controls him. He uses his shin to hold his leg down, gives him a couple strikes, doesn't hit him too hard, and basically uses a schoolyard headlock to sweep him, bring him down, control him on the ground, hit him a couple times. And people say, oh, how come he didn't use Wing Chun? If your goal is to embarrass someone, all right, then you don't go in there standing guns blazing to kick and chain punch them on the ground. All right. And look, and I'm not endorsing what happened. Again, I think the Wing Chun world could have been without that event. But if you wanted to clown someone because you thought that they were making claims that, that they were the best fighter, or that they were the best at this or whatever, then you would probably want to kind of just hold them and pin them down. The schoolyard headlock is the classic example. Like, if you're the best fighter, then I'm not going to come with a straight kick, chain punches, pax out elbow, and show you, well, the younger Wing Chun guy was able to beat you because, he's a Kunpa, Sifu Cheung in fist fighting, fear the younger fist fighter, right? That would have been the perfect application of that motto, right? Okay. But no, I'm going to put you in a schoolyard headlock and hold you, and you're not going to be able to get out of it. And then I'm just going to take you to the ground. I'm going to rough you up on the ground. And I remember I had a very similar experience when I was a kid.
Oh yeah.
And it was one of the reasons. Yeah, it was one of the reasons where I realized I needed to learn how to use my hands, and I needed to learn how to grapple a little bit.
Oh, because you were doing Taekwondo.
I was doing Taekwondo, so my kicks were like really fast or whatever. Yeah. We had almost no hands in Taekwondo. And it was in middle school. This is beef. I didn't start Wing Chun or learning anything about grappling until high school.
Got it.
Even though my first karate instructor actually started learning from the Gracies, and we learned like a couple things, but I really didn't know anything on the ground. And then there was like a buddy at my bus stop, and then he said, oh, I heard you do Taekwondo. And I didn't like tell people I did martial arts. And I was like, oh no, I just do a little bit. He's like, yeah, what would you do if I put you in a headlock? And I'm like, I don't know what that is. And he grabbed me and put me in a headlock and put me on the ground and held me there. And I literally couldn't do anything. And I remember being so angry and so frustrated because you just feel like you're kind of drowning and you can't do anything. And here I am, I can like break boards and kick and do all these spinning kicks. And he literally just grabbed me and put me in a headlock, right? And then I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe at some point I need to learn a little bit about this, right? But it embarrassed me internally because I was like, where was all my Taekwondo training? The headlock, the schoolyard headlock, bring someone to the ground and roughen them up, is a way to embarrass someone. And the idea that Emin had to go in there guns blazing with chain punches and kicks and elbows and knees, and that if he just beat him, it would have been like the younger aggressive guy beat up the older guy. But when you just put someone in a headlock and bring them to the ground and rough them up, that is for the sake of embarrassment. That's the whole reason why he did it. All right, at least as far as I understand it. And what I would also like to say in defense of Emin, even though I believe the exchange shouldn't have happened, all right? Go back in time to 1986. Yeah. To William Chung at that time. He was a little older, but still relatively fit.
Okay.
You go put him in a headlock and bring him to the ground.
Try.
Yeah, go try. All right. Go. I'll wait. I'll watch. All right. So the fact that Emin even could put him in a headlock is pretty remarkable. Now, what happened immediately in the aftermath of that incident Because remember, this is 1986. There's no internet. Had that happened now, that thing would have been live streamed right away. It would have been on YouTube right away, right? But back then,
TikTok.
everything was really slow, right?
The ticking talking.
Unique Publication, which is a publisher that's owned by Black Belt Magazine. All right, so Black Belt Magazine is Unique Publication. So they would have their magazine, and then they would publish books, usually with authors that they put on the cover. So it's like, they would put a guy on the cover, but they were also now promoting his book, which is the same company, right? And in the wake of Bruce Lee's death, there was a big thing like, who's going to be the successor to Bruce Lee? Who's going to be the next guy, whether it's a Wing Chun guy or a Jeet Kune Do guy? And Black Belt Magazine latched on to William Chung. And they would put him on the cover, and William Chung has his story, which is, we'll get to in a moment, which is the whole thrust of the question here, that he was the sole inheritor of like the real or proper or traditional Wing Chun style, and that every other student of Yip Man learned a fraudulent, inferior Wing Chun style, right? And so not only was William Chung a friend of Bruce Lee's, someone who had taught Bruce Lee, but also he had letters from Bruce Lee, and Bruce Lee's early students said that, Bruce would often talk about what a great fighter William Chung was. So you have the Bruce Lee endorsements. You have the cred being a Yip Man student.
Street cred is
and
real.
now you also, he was a fighter and all this. And now he's got this story that, but also the Wing Chun he does is historically significant because it's the only real one. Because Bruce had made criticisms about things being lacked in Wing Chun, and surprise, surprise.
Well,
The traditional William Chung style, the traditional style that William Chung teaches, actually has the answer to all of the problems that Bruce Lee said Wing Chun had. And it's an older version which he could never learn or whatever, right? And Black Belt Magazine went really hard on promoting William Chung. And in the wake of Leung Ting's student or grand student kind of roughing up William Chung, the Black Belt Magazine kind of shadow banned Leung Ting for a number of years. So there were like from 86, there are a few years like you don't see Leung Ting on the cover of Black Belt Magazine for a while because they were salty. You know what I mean? Like they had taken their poster boy for Wing Chun and they had kind of embarrassed him. And I have the magazine. I think it's January or February 1987. Inside Kung Fu.
yeah.
It talked about the incident. All right, because it had just come out, right?
What?
And in the first iteration so they asked William Chung what happened. Now my recollection could be a little old. I haven't read that in a while. I need to reread it. The magazine is somewhere right behind you, actually. That William Chung claimed that, the guy who attacked him, I think either he said he had weapons on him or he was wearing a padded suit. So therefore, William Chung's strikes and special death touch strikes or whatever didn't work, right?
Oh.
And because clearly what William Chung didn't know is that there was a video. He was, I think, so shell-shocked by the entire event. He didn't even realize that there was a dude holding a camera there. So he said this stuff like there were weapons and there was a padded suit, and then the video came out. And you see that not only were there no weapons involved, there was no padded suit. Emin was wearing like the 1980s tracks matching top and bottom tracksuit,
Right.
Classic standard issue for Coney Island. And also William Chung didn't even get one punch off. So even if Emin was wearing a padded suit, where were these punches, right? He didn't know. And then later he had amended, he got attacked from behind. And there's a photo of Emin facing William Chung from across before the fight starts, right? So he came up with a lot of excuses for why he lost the fight before he knew the video came out. And then he's since changed his story multiple times, right? Now, again, that's the kind of stuff that followers of William Chung, when they hear that, they're going to get upset. Maybe they're going to get upset with me. I'm just telling you, like, you might not like what I just said, okay? But I can show you from the various interviews that William Chung had since the incident that he did something that Wong Jack Man did, which is he changed his story a few times, all right?
Okay.
Wong Jack Man changed his story so many times from what happened. It was a draw. He beat Bruce Lee, was inconclusive, like he just kept changing it, right? So you don't have to believe me. You can see that William
That's how
Chung
he-
did change his
that's how
story.
he probably remembered it, right?
I don't know about that. Okay. And then later, like he had the slippery shoes, so he couldn't stay on his feet. And then, because he's visiting Germany, he's in a foreign country. He doesn't want to get in trouble for fighting. Look, that last one is a legit thing. I mean, if you're in a foreign country and someone attacks you at a seminar and you're a martial arts instructor and you beat the snot out of them,
Ouch.
what are the local laws regarding fighting? Yeah, I mean, like people sound like that one I feel is kind of legit, but it doesn't seem like that's actually what was going on here. Because the moment someone puts their hands on you, all right, I think most modern countries would say you have you're legally justified to defend yourself at that point. The moment someone holds on to you and grabs you or won't leave you alone, right? So anyway, that is a little bit of the history of the beef between the Leung lineage and the William Chung lineage, right? Then later there was another incident in New York that happened in the 90s or whatever, but that's beyond the scope of this, right?
Okay.
So now we kind of come back to the story, right? Now, I do not want to strawman William Chung's history, okay? Because the basic history, as William Chung told it or tells it, is that there are two streams of Wing Chun, two versions of Wing Chun. You have traditional, which is what he does. Swap out traditional. Traditional is a euphemism for authentic in the William Chung world. And then modified, which is the version with the pigeon-toed stance that we do. All right. But this dichotomy of traditional or modified, it's William Chung is the one who created this dichotomy. It's a false dichotomy, first of all. And second of all, I still get questions every once in a while, do you teach traditional or modified Wing Chun? And that's just like, someone asking you, do you like if someone would categorize hip hop in two categories, which are not two categories that anyone, like not even talking East Coast and West Coast, just saying like, do you like the classical hip hop, or do you like the modernized hip hop? And the classical and modernized is not whether it came from the 70s or 80s. It's like something specific that person has created. Like anytime you rhyme two words within a line, that's classic. And if it's only the last word, it's like people just create these categories, and then forever you have to then say you're either category A or category B. There is no such thing as traditional or modified Wing Chun outside of the William Chung world. All right, it doesn't exist. It's a distinction he created to prop up what he does and stigmatize what everyone else does. Okay, even though outside of the William Chung universe, if something is traditional, it usually means it's old-fashioned, out of date. And if something is modified, it usually means it's been improved. Okay. But in the William Chung world, it's the other way around. All right, the traditional one is the real one that's effective, and the modified one is some watered-down bullshit or something like that, right? But outside of the William Chung world, I would implore anyone not to use these two terms, because you are conceding a historical fallacy here. It's a false dichotomy created by one lineage of Wing Chun, as if the rest of the Wing Chun world is somehow divided into these two categories that he himself created. It doesn't exist. All right. It's pretty clear when you look at the other Wing Chun lines that come out of mainland China, namely those that come from Leung Jan, because his claim is that this is like Leung Jan had the real traditional style, and then he made up this modified style on the spot, and then taught these two versions, and only his son learned the Leung Bik version. The Leung Bik learned the real traditional version. Everyone else learned the fake modified pigeon-toed one, right? And then, of course, what he does is he takes a story beat out of Yip Man's story, which is that when Yip Man went to college, he started learning from Leung Bik, the son of Leung Jan. And that's where he learned the secret traditional Wing Chun style, because Leung Bik, the son of Leung Jan, learned the real style from Leung Jan, his father. But Yip Man originally learned the Chan Ma Shun style, which was the modified style. And then so now he learns the real one. So he took a story beat out of the actual story and then wedged it in. Although it's interesting because I'm a bit agnostic as to whether Leung Bik was a real person or not. But there are people who even dispute whether Leung Bik was a real person, or whether like that was even a real story. So the thing is, like, even William Chung's story even taking the story beat, it still has a little bit of a problem because my good friend Jim Rosalando, he now believes Leung Bic may have existed. But I mean, he believes very strongly. But
Well, to those who do not know who Jim Rosalando is,
who's following this conversation doesn't know who Jim Rosalando is?
Well-
Do you mean you don't know who Jim Rosalando
no,
is?
I
you know
I
who Jim
definitely.
Are you
I
sure?
love him.
Because I'm
He's
beginning
really
to think
cool.
that maybe you don't know. Who
I've done
Jim
I've
Rosalando
done
I
an
love
interview
that
with
guy.
him. I
He's
think
so
it was back
cool.
in season 2 or 3.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and he's from Pinsan Wing Chun, which is the
Yeah, we
side body Wing Chun style from Leung Chan. Which, if there's any evidence of this traditional William Chung style, this traditional Wing Chun style that William Chung teaches, then someone in the Leung Chan lineage should be doing it.
Yeah.
But no one is. And so in now with the internet and the ability to research the mainland branches of Wing Chun, even though there's a lot of variations between them, they still look more and more just like the Wing Chun that everyone else has seen of different degrees, but none of them really look like what William Chung is doing, right? So, but I don't want to straw man William Chung's history. So I went on my book rack here and I found William
Oh.
Chung's Buji book, all right, in which he details the history, all right?
Okay.
So
You're going to read from there.
I'm going to read from there. That way no one says I'm straw manning the history, okay? All right?
story time with the KFG.
Story time with the KFG, all right? Now, I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's two pages here.
Okay.
I'm only going to read the parts that are relevant to this story here, right?
So many people are confused about basics in Wing Chun Chi Sao. Some view it as a collection of moves, and masters confuse their own students by talking of principles and concepts without telling them what's what. The 15 Chi Sao Fundamentals is my attempt at explaining Wing Chun Chi Sao from a perspective of principles, but also with the basic techniques required to express those principles. It shows the framework for Hong Kong Wing Chun Chi Sao, in particular, the training of Pun Sao and Lap Da. This is necessary training before going on to the higher and more spontaneous expressions of Chi Sao. Right now, if you use the code KFG Chi Sao, you can get a signed copy of my book for the price of the unsigned one. Click on the link in the description below and use the code KFG Chi Sao at checkout to get a signed copy of this full color, over 230-page manual on the vital foundational training exercise of Wing Chun. This offer is good while supplies last, so get yours today.
So the first part, he talks about, that Wing Chun comes from the Qing dynasty, and the Manchus and the Shaolin Temple and the burning of the Shaolin Temple, and that the classical style took 15 to 20 years for a person to master, and the Shaolin Temple was raided and burned by the Manchus, and then Moy and Nun was the only survivor of the 5 original Grandmasters. So even here, his story is a little bit at odds with Yip Man's story. He says that Moy Anun was the only survivor of the original 5 Grandmasters who escaped. But Yip Man's own story is that there were 5, Mu Hin and Feng Tao Tak and Bak Mei and Ji Sin and all that they went out and they scattered everywhere. So already, even though I believe Yip Man's story is lore and fictitious anyway, but already we see discrepancies among the students, right? Now, of course, William Chung will probably would claim that, Yip Man taught him the real history. So the real history isn't what he wrote in the handwritten history. The real history is what he secretly taught William Chung, right? Like when no one was around, right? And the problem is that when a claim is not falsifiable, all right, which is like, okay, prove that there isn't a spaghetti monster flying around planet Earth right now. You can't. You can infer it's probably not true, but you cannot definitively say this thing doesn't exist because it could. You just don't know. But that is also what makes the point weak. Is that if I make a claim that is beyond your ability to substantiate it, all right, because it's secretly revealed wisdom. It was told to me in a vision. It was told to me by a man when no one was around. Which, by the way, of course, these things happen. Not everything that you're told is told while other people are around.
Like the talking dog.
Yeah, but the problem is when you make a claim and there's no way to substantiate it. It's like, well, how do you know Yip Man didn't tell me that? That's on its head a weak claim. All right, because it's so easy to make an unfalsifiable claim. Well, you just weren't there. You don't know. You got to take my word for it. Well, now we have to take it on faith, and now we cannot say that this is an indisputable fact. So we're going to have to try to find this out in other ways, right? And so this is often how these things get kind of smuggled. Well, prove to me Yip Man didn't say it. No. It's not my burden of proof to prove that Yip Man did not give William Chung the traditional Wing Chun, did not give him an alternate history. William Chung is the one making the claim. Therefore, it's William Chung's burden to provide evidence that that's true. Now, he may not be able to do it, but then that also means we are under no obligation to believe his claim because it's just something that he's saying.
Okay.
Of course, his students will believe it because they're his students. But as an outsider who's able to look at objective facts, give me a reason why this story is true. Historically, outside of William Chung said so, all right, which you wouldn't take that line of argumentation anywhere else. Why should we take it on the history of a style, right? For example, if you tell me, all right, that you got a dog, all right, you're like, hey, Sifu, you know, I got a dog, and I now have it at the apartment, right? I've known you for a few years. I would have no reason to doubt that you got a dog. Like, why would you lie about something like that? All right.
I like dogs.
But if I find out you didn't get a dog, then I would be like, oh, that's weird. You lied to me on that. And then so now I know that Dre is the kind of person who may not be honest about those things. But if I didn't find out, I would still believe you had a dog. All right. If I never found out that you actually didn't have one, right? But here's the difference between that problem and the problem of the history of a Kung Fu style. It's not going to hurt anyone whether I believe you have a dog or not. But when I make a claim about history, the true history, you implicate other people who are not there to defend themselves. And if the claim is false and you know it's false, then you're also besmirching the names of other people and the attitudes of other people. And then your claim is, it then becomes a bit sinister because now you're saying stuff that cannot be falsified. Yip Man is dead, long dead before William Chung makes these claims. And he says, yeah, well, prove to me that it didn't happen, which is a weak case. And now whether people believe in William Chung's traditional and modified story becomes a matter of almost a religious-like following. And now that claim means something. Whereas if you just claimed you had a dog when you didn't, there would be nothing that wouldn't harm anything, except that when I found out that you lied, I would now probably believe you less about other things you say. But my belief in whether Dre has a dog or not at his house doesn't change anything about what I teach or what I do. But when you make a claim that now directly teaches, that directly influences what people believe about the history of a style and the nature of martial arts and the nature of people who are no longer around, now it's pernicious. Now there's something a little sinister in that if it is in fact not true. And if you don't want to be called out for coming up with a sinister claim, then you should probably have better evidence. And when people want to get evidence for you and from you for these claims, as we have seen in the past, William Chung gets a bit defensive. And it's like, if you believe it's true, why are you getting defensive? You could just say, well, look, here's the evidence. But the evidence cannot be, Yip Man told me. That's hearsay. Doesn't hold up in court. Mm-hmm. And right now, all we have is him saying it. So now, let me read to you from the horse's mouth. All right?
All righty.
Okay, so Moy, a nun who was the only survivor of the original 5 Grandmasters, she passed on her knowledge onto a young orphan girl who she named Wing Chun. Orphan girl. Well, according to Yip Man's history, Yim Wing Chun's father was still alive. So again, these little small facts are not completely lined up.
Girl.
But also think about it. When Yip Man wrote down that history, which I did an almost hour-long video on, which, again, you can get here if you subscribe to the memberships on YouTube, or Patreons can get it now. That was written in 1965. William Chung had already left Hong Kong by 1959, 1960. So he wasn't up to date with what had gone on in the meantime. And in some of William Chung's recollections of other Wing Chun people, it's very clear that because he had left Hong Kong for Australia, William Chung's knowledge of who was around in the 60s and the exploits of Wing Chun at that time is remarkably weak because he wasn't there, right?
Okay.
So he continues on. Through the years, the style became known as Wing Chun. Its techniques and teaching were passed on to a few, always carefully selected students. Okay. Nearly 100 years ago, Leung Chan was one of the chosen students to receive training in Wing Chun. He lived with his two sons, Leung Bic and Leung Chun, in a prosperous Chinese city, Fatsan. Aside from his fame as a martial artist, Leung Chan owned an herbal shop. He was greatly respected by his community as a gentleman and a scholar, one who never boasted of his kung fu ability. All right, he never boasted, yet somehow we all know how great his kung fu was. Right, other people were boasting. All right, Chanhua Sun was a money changer with a shop next door to Leung Chan's. Chanhua Sun, as you know, is Yip Man Sifu, right? He was a large, strong man who admired his neighbor's Wing Chun ability. When Leung Chan chose to keep his art within his family and not take any outside students, Chanhua Sun resorted to spying on Leung Chan's daily teachings to his sons. Leung Chan soon learned of Chan's spying and deliberately taught a modified version when Chan was watching. Chan's dedication to spying eventually touched Leung Chan, and he was eventually accepted as a disciple. However, Leung Chan continued to teach only the modified version to Chan because he feared that after his own death, Chan would dispute the Wing Chun Grandmastership with his sons. Since Chan was a much larger and stronger man, neither of Leung Chan's sons could have defeated him if Chan had learned the real version of Wing Chun. Leung Chan's suspicions of Chanhua Sun were well-founded in reality. When Leung Chan and his son Leung Chun died, Chan drove the surviving son Leung Bic from Fatsan. Leung Bic settled in Hong Kong. Chanhua Sun wasted little time in teaching the modified version of Wing Chun to selected disciples. He enjoyed tremendous popularity, but after many years had accepted only 11 students. Then a 12-year-old boy, Yip Man, came to Chanhua Sun with 300 pieces of silver, asking for acceptance as his final disciple. At first, Chan assumed the boy stole the money from his parents. He accompanied Yip Man home, confronted his parents, and discovered that Yip Man had indeed saved the silver by himself. Admiring Yip Man's dedication, Chan accepted him as the last disciple. Yip Man studied Chanhua Sun's Wing Chun for 4 years, and after Chan's death, moved to Hong Kong. By the age of 16, he had a reputation as an accomplished martial artist. Through some of his martial arts friends, Yip Man was introduced to an eccentric old man with renowned kung fu ability. Yip Man challenged the old eccentric and lost dismally. The old man was Leung Bic, Leung Chan's surviving son of the original Wing Chun system. After the encounter, Leung Bic told Yip Man the story of the modified version and accepted him as his only student. Yip Man studied the authentic version of Wing Chun for 4 years. With his new knowledge, he returned to Fatsan, defeated his seniors in the modified system, and became the Grandmaster of Wing Chun. All Kung Fu practitioners of China respected him for his Kung Fu ability, but he never accepted any disciples. In 1948, when the communists took over China, Yip Man left for Macau, leaving his fortune behind. In Macau, Leung Cheung, a master of white eyebrow Kung Fu, found Yip Man in an impoverished state and took him to Hong Kong, where he cared for him. Leung Cheung had a Kung Fu school on the premises of the Restaurant Workers Union in Hong Kong. Yip Man was given a small apartment there. Every night after the restaurant closed, Kung Fu classes were conducted at the Workers Union. Often, Yip Man watched the classes in progress and without malice ridiculed the inadequacy of Leung Cheung's style. One night in 1951, Leung Cheung became angered by Yip Man's disrespect. To teach Yip Man a lesson, he challenged him through Leung Cheung. Although Leung Cheung was a larger and younger than Yip Man, he was no match for the art of Wing Chun and was easily defeated. After defeating Leung Chan, Yip Man revealed himself. Oh, it should be Leung Cheung. There's a typo in here.
Okay.
Yip Man revealed himself as the Grandmaster of Wing Chun and took Leung Cheung as his first student of a few always carefully selected students. All right. Now, the story was then, as it continues on, that William Chung was then accepted by Yip Man as the sole student to learn that original Leung Chan version. Okay? So you see what happened here. So it's like, okay, Leung Chan, he's teaching his sons, and then some dude next door starts spying. And then his solution, instead of just to say, hey, bro,
Hey.
I see you spying through there. Why don't you get the F out? Which would be the normal response of most Chinese sifus.
Oh, right.
His idea was, oh, he's watching. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to teach a fake style of Wing Chun to my sons because that guy's watching. All right. Now, I was not there. I cannot claim omniscience. Okay. I would just ask the listeners to use their own intellect. Is it reasonable that someone, a well-established Kung Fu instructor who's teaching his own son, which in Chinese culture, it's a very big deal, would then, because someone is spying on him, start teaching a completely different style of Wing Chun to his sons, whose legacy is important for him, just because some dude is watching. And then he's so impressed with this guy's spying that he's eventually like, oh, why don't you just start learning anyway? And then what is he teaching this guy separately from his sons, continuing on this weird fake style? Or is he teaching them all together, but then he has them in the corner? He's teaching them a different style than he's teaching his sons? Or does he continue teaching all of them this fake style? All right. So the problem is that when you just dig a little bit deeper, you go, there's something a little bit wrong. Now, for people unfamiliar with William Cheung's Wing Chun versus, let's say, the more orthodox versions of Yip Man Wing Chun, right? Yip Man Wing Chun, as most people know it, okay, you have a pigeon-toed stance, let's say. Now, look, your mileage is going to vary. Wong Sun Leung's stance is maybe a little bit wider than the Leung Ting stance. It's a little bit different from Choi Sung Tin's stance. It's not as buckled in. The Leung Sun guys really bend their knees more. The other guys a little more straight legs. So look, within the Yip Man family, you're going to see variations of this. All right. So when I attempt to paint Yip Man Wing Chun in a broad stroke, I'm saying in the broadest of strokes. Okay?
All right.
Yes, I know in your specific lineage they might do it this way. Like I don't have time to argue everyone's little detail on how their stance is different from the other guys. All right. But for the most part, you have a pigeon-toed stance where your toes are turned in, right? Knees are in, right? Upright posture, simple Siunum Tao form. Most of the movements held in front of the chest, all right? You have your Siunum Tao form, which is stationary. You have your Chum-Kyu form, where you add some steps and turns and some kicks. And then, your basic Chi Sao from a similar stance. When something comes at you, you often turn or shift to avoid it, or you turn or shift to generate power. Mm-hmm. And you close the gap and do some kind of chain striking. And, some basic kicks and things like that, right? And that is the mildest way I can put it without pissing too many people off. Because then, of course, if I start going into more details, the more details you go into, the more it just becomes a specific expression of that. But, the pigeon-toed stance, the turning, the move, and then you have like your Buji form and the dummy and knives and pole or whatever, right? William Cheung's style it's not like, for example, the orthodox Yip Man style. They do the internal rotation on the Hun Sao, and William Chung does an external rotation on the Hun Sao, right? Or the orthodox style of Wing Chun, they do the, Tan Sao a certain way, and in the William Chung or traditional version, it's done another way, but besides that, it's more or less the same. We're not talking about a couple minor differences, all right? We're talking about a wholesale change in the choreography. All right. Yes, if you look at William Cheung's Siunum Tao form, you can see where it's like the other Siunum Tao forms, but Wing Chun is all about details. And so the hand plate has this Wu Sao hand in front of his face or whatever, right? And whereas most orthodox styles will put the Wu Sao in front of the chest, right? And then someone might say, well, if the Wu Sao is not in front of the face, how do you protect the face? Well, that's already another false dichotomy. All right. It's black and white thinking. The Wu Sao in most orthodox styles is in front of the chest because it's not for protecting the face. It's for something else. But people say, how do you protect your face if your Wu Sao is in front of your chest? I don't protect my face with my Wu Sao. So the problem is like when people say, oh yeah, well, they always have a very basic rationalization. It's like, did you ever consider maybe that's not why would Yip Man do the Wu Sao in front of his chest if it's supposed to protect his face? because the Wu Sao's for something. All right. So William Chung's style is quite different. The shapes, the height of everything is noticeably higher. The stance is different. He has like a zhong tao, like an opening of his form, which most Yip Man styles don't have. His chamkyu form is even more different. Not just the weight distribution and the movements, but he's got a lot, like, it doesn't follow the same, like, chamkyu is a left moving form and then resets. It's like a typewriter.
Okay.
He's going right, left, up, down, diagonal, forward, whatever, right?
Okay.
His buji form is also different. Wooden dummy form is different. It's got a couple beats that are similar to the Yip Man one, but then it's different. His pole is different. His knife is different, right? So we're not talking about like it's a couple tweaks or the forms are the same, but the application is different. It's a different style of Wing Chun. Like the choreography is different. The way they do Chi Sao in a much higher position. And I'm not here to argue the merits or the pros and cons of each one. I'm just saying, like, for people who have not seen William Chung's Wing Chun, it's not a matter of a couple beats being different. All right. It's like a different form. The footwork is different. They use a T-step. They often raise their leg to close the gap to defend low line for the kicks. Very similar to JKD guys called leg jamming, right?
Okay.
It's something that they do, right? It's not unheard of in WT either. But then, so it's a different style. The forms are different. The applications are different. The footwork is different. The emphasis is different. And it has other methods that the modified version doesn't have. According to William Chung, it's some special eye training methods to make your reflexes quicker. There's iron palm in there as well. There's all this other stuff in there, right?
Okay.
So we're not talking about if a Sifu knows the traditional style and the modified style, all right? It's not like, okay, I'm going to teach this here, but let me just take you to the corner and show you a couple little tweaks. It's a totally different style, okay? So you couldn't teach it in the same room because if I go to you and I show you that the Tan Sao and the Wu Sao is in front of the chest, and then I go over to the other side of the room to teach my two sons, and I put the Wu Sao over here, you're going to go, what?
They're little, so the Wu Sao goes higher, I guess.
I don't know, right? Yes, exactly, something, right?
Something's up.
And then and then I go, oh no, never mind what they're doing over there. I do the Wizard of Oz explain away, right? Okay, or I have to teach you separately. And if I'm teaching you a modified version of Wing Chun that I'm basically making up on the fly, I'm conning you. So it's also a way of saying Leung Jan was a fraud who would take someone's money and con them into a fake style of Wing Chun. All right? So it's like if you're teaching them in the same room, there's a problem. If you're teaching them separately, there's a problem. Okay?
It all seems a bit too involved. You know what I mean?
Way too involved.
Yes, like if you're going to scam someone for money, just take their money.
Yes,
like,
but I'm coming to my next point. Like to piggyback off, it's not just a couple tweaks. Like the real Wing Chun style is they punch this way here, but if you just turn it a little bit, or like a couple little like fighting tips that you would only give your best boys. It is an entirely different style. The way they react to punches is different. The way they react to kicks is different. The way they do the footwork is different. It's like a different style of Kung Fu, right? But do you know what else this means? That the modified style, which we supposedly do with the toes turned in and everything like that, he had to create an entire style of Kung Fu on the fly with its own theories and own ways of dealing with stuff.
So creative.
So like, okay, he doesn't really turn or shift in the classical way in traditional Wing Chun, right? Like the way that we might against power, right? But he comes up with this way to turn and shift your weight onto one leg on the fly for Chan Ma Sun, right? And then different ways of reacting to punches and different ways of reacting to kicking. And these ways he knows are not as good as his real way. So as a Kung Fu instructor, he's totally fine teaching a bullshit version of his style that'll probably get your ass kicked if you do it, right? So it's like, so I'm going to make up an entire style on the fly, which is like, he's a real Kung Fu genius if he can do that.
Yeah.
This is a style that's not as good as this other one, but it's okay. You're a big guy, so you'll still be able to fight with it, whatever. And here's the other problem. That modified style with the pigeon-toed stance and shifting, that is a common thing you see among other Southern styles of Kung Fu. So it's like Hung Gar, all these other styles, they have very similar applications to Wing Chun when you get a real good Hung Gar guy who actually knows how to do it. So somehow Leung Chan, either had encyclopedic knowledge of Hung Gar and other Southern styles, so he could then make up a Wing Chun style which looked like the other Southern styles, while teaching the real traditional style to his sons, which are missing a lot of the hallmarks of a Southern martial art. And he just came up with this on the fly. So then, of course, the implication is, and then he says stuff like Chanma Shan, the one brother died, and Leung Bik was driven out of Fatsan because of Chanma Shan. So Chanma Shan is some kind of disrespectful kung fu bandit. Once Leung Jan dies, you know, Chanma Shan is like, all right, sons of, or remaining son of my Sifu, right? I'm the big boss here. And that guy goes, no, please don't hurt me. I'm going to escape to Hong Kong because my junior kung fu brother is such a meanie. I mean, this is ridiculous, right? I mean, when you hear this story, you just go like, it's just the explaining away of things to make the story fit is pretty evident. If you're not indoctrinated in the story, you would have no reason to believe this. And there's no evidence from contemporary sources that anything like this even happened. And not to mention the fact that Leung Bik is still disputed as to whether he actually was a real person or not. Okay? So, anyway.
Well, he did go to a real place.
So what he basically does is, you know, Yip Man would say, oh, he learned from Leung Bik when he went to college. And that's where he learned a more refined version. Because the story among the kind of classicists in the classic Yip Man story, not classic, the classic Yip Man story, is that Chanma Shan, Yip Man Sifu, was a bit of a brute, and just like William Chung said, kind of big, strong guy, but maybe not the most intelligent. So he couldn't grasp the innermost ideas within Wing Chun. But Leung Bik, Leung Jan's son, was learned, a scholar, and learned this innermost stuff, right? So the idea is that when Yip Man had the chance to learn from Leung Bik in Hong Kong, that's where he learned all this stuff in detail. And so it was like a finishing school where he got to learn a lot of the things he wouldn't have been able to learn from his Sifu, or really from his Seeing Zhong because Chanma Shan died pretty early on. So even Yip Man's own narrative is kind of like, yeah, when he went to Leung Bik, he got some refinement, which may have included footwork. And it seems that William Chung kind of took that and said, yeah. That's where I'm going to say. But it wasn't just footwork or refinements. It was an entirely different style. Okay? And that secretly came from Leung Jan. And then Leung Bik learned it. And then Leung Bik taught it to Yip Man. And then when Yip Man went back to Fatsan, according to William Chung, he beat up his old seniors. All right? Which most versions of the story was that when Yip Man came back to Hong Kong, what he had learned from Leung Bik was a little bit of a departure from what he had learned from his Sihangs. So as to not ruffle any feathers, he just didn't really teach. And William Chung said he had no disciples in Fatsan, but that's not true. He taught Guok Fu, Lun Gai, these guys here. But William Chung wouldn't have known that because this stuff came out later. So you see, like, what he kind of writes as an authoritative history comes off as, no, these are the very few story beats you heard in your short time under Yip Man, which you expanded upon, which then later we actually found more of the story, which are now at odds with the one you created. So it's a bit of an issue, right? So now we have, you know, Yip Man knowing this traditional Wing Chun style, but he also knows the modified one. And then so in 1949, he flees China for Hong Kong. In 1950, he decides to start teaching Wing Chun at the Restaurant Union, all right? Not exactly in the way Mr. Chung described it, all right? And then no one has heard of Wing Chun before. So he needs to forge a reputation for this style, right? There are going to be challengers. We need to challenge other people, okay? So what am I going to do? I have this less effective modified pigeon-toed version. Or I have this super secret version, which is totally ass-kicking in every way. Which style am I going to teach my students to forge a reputation? I'll teach them the not real style. The style that my Sigong made up while someone was spying on him.
Okay.
A style that was made up on the fly.
Yeah. Oh, man.
And somehow somehow Yip Man teaches this made-up modified style to his students. And with that made-up modified style, they still make a name for themselves. William Chung is still relatively successful as a fighter using this modified style. Wong Sun Leung is relatively successful Bruce Lee is successful. These other guys are successful.
Okay.
And even though the style's a fake style that was more or less created on the fly, I can imagine, can you create a Kung Fu style on the fly that's
On the
incredible?
fly, that's so
So-
successful.
So, yeah, imagine being able to make up a Kung Fu style on the fly, which is still good enough to beat up challengers from other Kung Fu styles in 1950 Hong Kong, even though it's a style that was made up by someone
On the fly.
on the fly because someone was watching him and he couldn't just tell that guy, hey, you,
Hey.
I see you peeking through the fence right there. You get the out,
Right.
all right?
Could have just shut it down
No,
right there.
no, let me
No.
keep up this
Let me
charade, all right, of making up a
great.
it's unintelligible as an actual story. This is
And there's
not
no movie
human.
about this?
This is William Chung was actually hired to do a film in the late 70s, early 80s called Descendant of Wing Chun, where he was playing Leung Chan. And the story was he was later replaced. I think it was the guy's name is Melvin Wong. All right, from the band The Melvins. No,
Yeah.
Melvin Wong
Yeah.
or either Manfred Wong or Melvin Wong.
Manfred Wong.
Yeah,
And Manfred Wong was from Manfred Mann.
yes, it's one of the two. Who was actually a lawyer, a famous lawyer in Hong Kong, and they fired William Chung after 2 weeks. And the story was that William Chung wasn't able to do the choreography because if he's a real fighter, movie choreography, like just because someone is a real fighter doesn't mean they can do movie choreography.
Okay.
But I also heard that William Chung was also trying to change the script to fall in line with his version of Wing Chun. So he wanted to change the script to make this traditional modified thing part of it. And at some point they were just sick of him and they fired him. But you can see there's still some promo shots of William Chung in the brown suit for Descendant of Wing Chun. I think they even had it on the cover of the DVD, although he's actually not in the movie because he was fired after a couple of weeks because he couldn't act, he couldn't do the fighting, and perhaps he was trying to insert his own narrative into the script. So
Special movie.
yeah, so that's what happened with that. That's the one movie that could have had the traditional modified narrative in there.
Yeah.
So think about it. Yip Man comes, he decides to teach his fake style of Wing Chun. He knows it's fake. And somehow they get a reputation. Then, fast forward to the late 50s, William Chung, who was, by all accounts, not just a good fighter, but he was also a bit of a thug, bit of a street kind of street fighter, right?
Yeah.
And William Chung also, in my opinion, had a little bit of a chip on his shoulder because his father was a police detective. And at that time, the police detectives were very powerful. Many of them were taking T-money bribes from the triad. So if you were like a high-level inspector, police detective inspector in the 50s and 60s, that didn't just mean you were a high-ranking cop. It also probably meant you were living comfortably.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you got to that level, you probably were a dirty cop. Because that was normal. There was no internal affairs, the ICAC, the Independent Council Against Corruption, wasn't formed until 1974. So even though they had some they tried in vain to have some anti-triad bureaus even in the 60s, it never had any teeth because the guys who were investigating whether they were gangsters in influencing police officers were gangsters themselves. All right. So it was like you had gangsters policing gangsters at that time, right? It wasn't until 74 that they really had any teeth to go after that. So, William Chung's father, as a high-ranking police inspector, probably had some money.
Okay.
And he had a son, Cheung, King Kong Cheung, as he was called, with his wife. But then because he was wealthy, he also had a side wife, a concubine. At that time, if you had money, that was a little bit more normal, that a wealthy person could also afford to have a second wife. Eventually, that became illegal in Hong Kong, and whether that wife was legally his wife or just called his wife is still another story. But later, rich businessmen in Hong Kong, even in the 80s and 90s, they still carried on that tradition, but their second wife and family would be in mainland China because there was no way to connect the two legally. So a lot of rich businessmen in Hong Kong, they had a wife and family in Hong Kong, and then they would go off to China to do business, and they had a second wife and family over there.
Well, now I aspire to be a rich businessman in Hong Kong.
In the 80s.
Yeah. We're bringing it back.
Bringing it back, right? So William Cheung is the son, not of his father's first wife, but he's the son of the concubine of the second wife, which means he's not a bastard son because his father's there, but he's a son of his father's concubine, which means that in a kind of a Chinese hierarchy, he's not considered like a true son, and he doesn't have the same standing as his older brother. His older brother, by the way, was also a student of Yip Man, very close student of Yip Man. And his older brother married a Shaw Brothers movie starlet named Lei Koi On, who also had learned some Wing Chun. And there are even photos of Yip Man showing her some of the knife stuff. So his older brother was, a Wing Chun student of Yip Man who had a wife who was famous, also learned from Yip. So this is kind of a side note, right? I believe William Chung's older brother died.
Older brother had the same mother or different? No,
same
first
father.
wife.
Same father. But his older brother is the son of the wife of his father, right?
The main wife.
Yes, the main wife, right?
Oh, wow.
William Chung is the son of the side wife.
Yes.
All right, yeah.
Ooh,
and that's
the chip.
maybe part of the reason why William Chung has kind of had to he feels maybe he has to prove himself. I mean, look, I'm not a psychologist. It's very armchair pop psychology here, but actually that
Right.
William Chung having a chip on his shoulder, having to prove himself, that point was actually told to me by one of William Chung's students. All right. So just to be fair, that actually the person who told me this bit about William Chung being the son of the side wife, and that maybe that's why he was like this, right? When you look at the old letters, William Chung he had like a very Trumpian signature. Yeah. He would his signature would take up like the whole, the letter would be this big and his signature would be 50% of it. Right? So, I mean, look, I'm not a psychologist or anything, but you can see something about, I think there's some wounds about his status that also then made him want to stand out a little bit more, which could explain why he has this narrative, right? And then he claimed that he was a secret live-in student of Yip Man. Chen Chi Man, my good friend, who passed away, was brought to Wing Chun because of William Chung. William Chung beat him up. So I know one of my good friends is like, oh yeah, William Chung beat me up, and that's how and he brought me to Yip Man or whatever. So I mean, William Chung was a legit student of Yip Man. He was around at that time. Mm-hmm. But I remember asking Chan Sifu, I go, well, William Chung, did he live with Yip Man? And he goes, no, because he claimed that he lived with Yip Man, and during the time that he lived with Yip Man, he was learning the secret style. And then Chan Sifu was like, because Chan Sifu he had not seen William Chung since William Chung left Hong Kong. Okay. So when William Chung left Hong Kong, Chan Sifu, Chen Chi Man, only knew him as, his elder brother who beat him up. But the Wing Chun that William Chung was doing was the same Wing Chun that they were all doing under Yip Man. He had never seen William Chung off in the corner doing traditional Wing Chun secretly and going, oh, whoops, I'm not supposed to show you this. Because the story was that when he secretly learned this from Yip Man, and there's also a very convenient plot device, made him swear an oath not to teach this to anyone else. So even as a teenager, and we all know how good teenagers are at keeping secrets.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when it's about getting your ass kicked or not getting your ass kicked. Sworn oath. So, of course, poor William Chung, he couldn't show Bruce Lee this real stuff. Because had he been able to show Bruce Lee the real traditional Wing Chun, Bruce may not have needed to create a Jeet Kune Do, right? Yeah. And how had he could only tell his older brother, Wong Tse-leung, this stuff, Wong Tse-leung would be even more successful as a fighter, right? But he couldn't because he was sweared by an oath, all right? And couldn't tell the story until after Yip Man died, all right? It's okay. Again, if you're not indoctrinated in it, you would be under no obligation to believe it, because these are all claims that require the burden of proof is on William Chung. It's not my burden to disprove it. Okay. He's the one making claim after claim after claim. You now have to substantiate that burden. It is not my burden. All right. And I don't feel that burden of proof has been met.
It does sound like the Canadian girlfriend that you met over the
She's
summer.
really hot, bro.
Super hot. You can't remember her name, but you definitely...
I can't remember her name, but I had this really hot girlfriend, and then you asked where is she? Oh, no, she lives in Canada.
Yeah, what's her name? I can't remember, but it was cool. Are you going to meet? No, I lost her number.
Yeah. It's always that kind of like, oh, I swore an oath, whatever, right?
Yeah.
So when I asked Chan Sifu, I said, well, was he living with Yip Man? He goes, no. He goes, when we left Yip Man's class, we all left together and went home. Because Chan Sifu, he didn't follow William Chung's claims, because when William Chung left Hong Kong, as far as Chen Chi Man went, he was a guy who learned the same Wing Chun they were learning, and they went to class together and they left together. Mm-hmm. He didn't see him going to Yip Man secretly and doing this, that, and the other thing, right? And then later, William Chung becomes famous and then has this totally different Wing Chun style. And Chen Chi Man never saw William Chung again. I mean, Chen Chi Man just passed away about 2 years ago. From 1959 or 1960, whenever William Chung had left Hong Kong, Chan Sifu never saw his Sihing again. So he only saw him in the magazines doing this other style of Wing Chun and then making these claims that he learned it secretly from Yip Man. And Chun Sifu was like, well, we were all together back then.
Where
When
does it come from?
we would literally leave class together and go home and go have tea or go have you have the midnight kanji after training and go home. Where's he with Yip Man during all the that he'd live with him and all this kind of stuff, right? So the evidence isn't there. If it's there and the evidence isn't, here's a really good fighter under the William Chung banner and he can beat you up. The fact that whether someone can beat you up or not beat you up does not substantiate a historical claim. Those are two different things, buddy. All right. Okay. So we're talking about history here. William Chung has saddled himself with an extremely high burden.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I realize this is a very long part one. I cannot even get to the question without having laid this foundation down.
Oh, wow.
I can't even get to the question because not everyone knows the story. And also not everyone might understand my take on it, which is one, even though I just spent an hour and a half talking about it, I don't give a shit. It's just that because I've inherited this stuff as a Leung guy. So I looked into the story. I've talked to William Chung guys. I've read this story, and I need to give this so that maybe next episode
We'll
I
have
can
to
actually
part two it.
I can actually answer the question.
This will be a
Part
first.
2 in it. Dun, dun, dun.
And that's all I got to say about that. All right, everyone. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Kung Fu Genius. As always, don't forget to subscribe to the Kung Fu Genius. Hit that bell for notifications. Support us on Patreon or here on YouTube as a member. And as always, I'll see you guys next time.
Word is I'm a kung fu genius. Technique speaks for me, not lineage. Forget Jet Li, cause I'm the one. Many call me Sifu, but to you I'm Si-Gung. And I produce masters. You surpassed us. Your kung fu stiffer than corpse and caskets. City Wing Chun is the house I built. Violate the gate and your blood gets spilt. Alex, Richter, always the victor.
We will not stop giving you shit, Dre. Sorry. We only talk shit because we love you, Dre.
Yeah, absolutely.
We just know how this story ends. Every time. 110% of the time.
100% of the time, it's going to end this way. You know
I
what
will
I'm
put
saying?
money on this shit.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
The problem is no one would bet against me because everyone knows what's going to happen.
That's right. I'm not
There's
taking
no
that
one
bet.
taking the other bets.
Yeah, I'm not taking that bet. Are you kidding me?
Yeah,
You're gonna-
exactly.
Look, dude, if you want a free $5, I'll bet you $5 it's going to work right now. There you go.
I'll take a
Okay,
free
there you go.
$5.
There we go.
I'll
There
take a
you
free
go. All
$5.
right. Yeah, I got
All
you.
right. Yeah.
Nice one.
I don't give him.
How do I find the questions?
1, 2, 3, bam. All right.
Mikey
Here we
T
go.
has to clap.
All right,
Oh,
you
by
ready?
the way, we have to clap at the end as well, apparently, because according to Andrew, if we clap at the end, he'll be able to keep it even more in time with the lips.
That's weird because when I used to edit it and I'm amateur as hell, all I needed was one clap to wind it up.
Now, did you see? I'd like to say I'm recording this, so Andrew's going to hear it. Except he'll probably just skip through it at 1.5.
Yeah, he has his
speed, so
little,
he'll miss all the stuff.
AI that does this
Yeah,
for him, right?
absolutely.
It's more like the AI prefers to have the clap on both sides, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Okay.
Absolutely.
Hold on a second. Before you keep reading,
Uh-huh.
I'm looking over at Mikey Dean,
Oh, yeah.
and he's giving me the look because at the beginning of the episode, he told you not to talk too close to the mic because you're a hip hopper who likes to pop into the mic.
Am I popping?
Yeah, you're popping all over the place.
You
Purple.
f***ers never listen to me. That's the problem. All right? You hip-hop bastards never listen
Bastards.
to me. In all my years in nightlife, dealing with bloody hip-hoppers all the time.
Bloody. They're bloody.
I want to hold the mic. Why is it feeding back? You have to fix it. No, hold the mic properly, you moron.
fix it.
Yes.
I love you, Dre.
You nunts. All right.
Love being a hip hopper.
All right, go for it.
Sigh.
All right, peeps, on today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will not be talking about controversial subjects like William Chung. Lots of gems, lots of William Chung. Now
Let's
we're
see how
gonna-
many takes you're going to do it actually in.
All right. Sorry, I didn't realize you were about to
What's
go.
crazy is I lip synced.
That was
and he said,
amazing.
"All right."
Yeah, I thought it was. I was like, wow, you sound just like Kung Fu Genius. All right.
I heard something back there too. Two
What are, you,
firsts.
what are you up to today, Mikey? What about you, Dre? You got to go to prison later?